Thank you, everybody. So the meeting of Faculty Senate will now come to order. Welcome, everyone. As Judy just mentioned, we do have quorum for today's meeting. And we do not have to check in with our Potomac State and WVU Tech colleagues because they are already on the meeting as panelists like the rest of us today. So that's pretty exciting. The minutes from our last Faculty Senate meeting that took place in March have been distributed as an annex to your agenda. Does anyone have additions or corrections to the March meeting minutes? If you do, you have to unmute yourself and say that you have corrections or additions. Okay, hearing that there are no corrections, the minutes from March meetings are approved as written. And so I'm going to give everybody a little just update of kind of how today's meeting is going to proceed. As you can guess, I never thought that my last Senate meeting as chair would be conducted in this manner, but these are unprecedented times that require all of us to be flexible and resilient, so here we are. Today's meeting is the first time that faculty are going to be able to have the opportunity to ask questions regarding the reopening of campus in the fall to our administrators. Last week, you should have received an email from me asking for questions ahead of time. I want to thank all of you who sent questions to the Faculty Senate leadership team. We had quite a few of those, and again, we greatly appreciate those questions ahead of time. And we've shared many of those with our those that are going to be reporting to us this afternoon, so that they can really work some of those answers into their presentations. There are, like I said, we have had a plethora of questions. So we are going to try to get as many of those questions answered today as possible, but I also want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So I am going to limit the meeting to a 2-hour period. What we will do is we have started a document with all the questions that have been asked to us thus far. We will continue to add questions as they come in this afternoon as well. And then the Faculty Senate leadership team will make sure that we reach out to the appropriate person to get the answers if we're not able to answer those today. And then we will distribute that Q&A document to all senators and faculty once we have that completed for you. So how we're going to proceed this afternoon is I'm going to have President Gee, then Provost Reed, then Vice President Alsop, and then Vice President Martin all give their reports or presentations. And then we will open up the floor for questions because I think that some of the questions may be answered as we proceed this afternoon. So I want to make sure that we wait till all those reports have been given. Any senators will either be able to ask their questions using the Q&A box or by unmuting themselves. They can ask questions in person. Faculty who are on today's call that are not senators can also put questions in the Q&A box, but they don't have access to be able to use the microphone. So, and then one other thing I want to mention to you is that if you can, please just keep the video of yourself, if you're not presenting, like hidden, then it will help us proceed with the meeting without interruption. So does anybody have any questions before we proceed? All right. So with no further ado, I'm going to call on President Gee to give his report.
See you. Thank you, Emily. First of all, thank you to everyone for joining us. I appreciate it, and I know that this has been a trying time for everyone, and so I particularly appreciate that people will come and join us today. And Emily, I just want to have a point of personal privilege, and that is to thank you for the great work you've done. Emily has been a real privilege to work with, and she also is a member of our university's board of governors and represents the faculty and the interests of the university very well. So I thank you for that. So we've got 2 issues, and I'm going to try to be as quick as I possibly can because we've got a lot of things going on. But we've got 2 issues. First of all, we've got the pandemic. We're 3, 4 months into the pandemic right now. And then the issue, of course, that we have immediately is the brutal murder of George Floyd and all of the subsequent protests and upheaval and soul searching, which I think we've all gone through, as a matter of fact. You know, I had the privilege of giving Maya Angelou an honorary degree and spent some time with her. And I still remember when she said that she hoped that the curtain would fall on the minstrel show of hate. I've always thought that was a wonderful way to think about it, but as we know, that has not happened. Sometimes it starts to fall and then it rises again, and certainly in these times of uncertainty, the curtain rises due to fear and loss. So we have a nation that has its fabric torn, and one of the things that I feel very strongly about our university is the fact that every one of us, all the people here, our faculty, our staff, our students, alumni, and friends, that we all need to think about ourselves as weavers. People are going to reweave that fabric. And so in this time of real challenge, there's never been more important time for a university, nor a more important time for our own. And I just want to be very clear about that we want to stand out and stand up, and we clearly will. So I want to turn to the pandemic and the social and economic consequences. First of all, I've never really had a chance to thank all of my faculty colleagues for their ability to be able to really turn on a dime and move almost immediately into online teaching. That is remarkable because of the fact that it required a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of rewriting and effort, and a variety of other things. And I cannot thank you enough. It is an example of the fact that, yes, universities can move fast when we believe that we have to and when it is necessary. My friend Rob Alsop talks about the fact that we have a hammer and we have a dance. The hammer was the closing down of the university, and the hammer was the closing down of our economy, as a matter of fact. But now we're into a dance, and we have to just realize that we've got to learn how to manage this, because it's going to be with us forever, even when we find a vaccine. This is going to be with us forever. I point out that, you know, most of us take flu shots, and 88,000 people died of the flu this year, and we have driver's licenses, and 50,000 people died in car wrecks. So this is going to be with us. It's a dangerous, dangerous damn thing. And we all know that. And no one is more vulnerable than me, as you know, because I'm in the exact age. You know, I have everything. I have asthma. I have a defibrillator. I'm 76. So no one is more concerned about this than I am. But what I want to say to you is, as part of this report, that, you know, this is my last gig. I really had an intent of moving on and into the horizon, but I think that I'll have to hang out here for a little bit longer. But I do have 40 years worth of wisdom, and I have a lot of mistakes that I've made. So because this is my last gig, I think that I can be very honest with you without posturing for another job or any other thing. So let me just say a couple of things to you. First, our number one priority is to focus on the safety of our students, our faculty, and our staff. I mean, it just is pretty simple. That is our number one priority. In that regard, we're going to be very transparent. That's one of the things we're doing now, and one of the things we'll continue to do. And Sharon Martin will talk about all of the various communication apparati that we have. But I certainly want to say that any good ideas, any opportunities for us to have discussions are important. But to use an analogy I've used a lot, we are flying an airplane while we're bolting on the wings. We do not know all the answers. And in fact, we're not going to know a lot of the answers. We're going to have to continue to develop those answers. But one thing we will do is we're going to be very data driven, and data is going to drive us on almost everything that we're doing. So I'll just quote myself from the Chronicle of Higher Education last week, when I said that I think that this is an existential moment for higher education. If you take a look at the New York Times, I don't have it right in front of me, Frank Bruni's article, the Wall Street Journal had another article, the New York Times Magazine, everyone is speculating that this is the demise of higher education. I do not believe that. In fact, I believe that our better angels were ahead of us, but I do know that we're going to have tremendous challenges in front of us. This I do know: there will never be a normal nor a new normal. Let me just say that to you again. For those of you who wish that we're going to just return to the way we were before, it will not happen. Trust me. And in fact, I think that what we're going to do is see a fundamental rebalancing in our own university and many others, and it's going to be a new world. So we're all going to have to live with two things: discomfort and ambiguity. And I want you to think about those two words. We're going to be uncomfortable about some of the things we have to do and some of the things you have to do, and you're going to have to learn to live with ambiguity. And but we also must have aggressive patience. Let me say that again: aggressive patience. And we're going to have to make choices. All of us are going to have to make choices. Some of them are difficult. We're going to have to ask the question, and this is the fundamental question for higher education, for our university: how do we reduce costs and improve quality? And we must come up with new ways to recognize and value our faculty. Particularly, I think that you've heard me say this before, but the old 40-40-20 formula is dead. We no longer can recognize people based upon the McDonald's hamburger model, and we have to move on because of that. And our first priority must be, for every faculty member, it's got to be pretty simple. That's about teaching and learning. We need to make certain that we have very bright and able students here. We need to meet our enrollment targets. We need to meet our targets in terms of retention and increase that retention. And we need to make certain that our students understand that we are very committed to them. This university will not be able to function if we do not have the teaching learning activity of the institution running well, and our students here and very happy. And so we've got to embrace this new world. We'll need to edit to amplify, and we are going to remain. My absolute commitment is that we're going to remain an R1 university, but we're also going to remain a very fierce land-grant institution. We're going to have to continue to differentiate ourselves, and our research is going to have to reflect that. So my final plea to you is this, is that if you have a question, ask it. If you have a suggestion, then make it. If you hear a rumor or you hear certain amounts of gossip, don't believe it. Let me just say that again, don't believe it, because those are the things that really destroy the fabric of a university. So we're all going to have to trust each other. I trust you. I want you to trust me. And I want you to know that we will not only make it through this, but I think that we can all say, at least from the folks that you hear right here, we're going to thrive. And that means that we're going to be different from a lot of other institutions. So saying that, I think I'm turning the time now over to the Provost. Madam Provost.
Okay, thank you very much, Gordon. And thank you all for having us today. And I want to reiterate, first of all, what President Gee said, and that is that we truly appreciate all of the work that the faculty did this spring in making such a rapid transition to online teaching, and doing so, or remote teaching, I should say, doing so without complaint, doing so with the best interests of the students at heart, and I really appreciate that. I'd like to say that we will not be asking more of you, but that's not the case. We are heading into fall, and it's going to be a heavy lift for all of us. And we are going to have expectations that will continue to stretch you and ask more of you. And I want to talk about that return to campus. I do want to say that I looked at the questions. We're not going to be able to answer all of them today. We do have a campus conversation on Thursday at 10 o'clock to address the reopening of campus on the academic side. So I encourage all of you, if you can, to attend that as well. And I will have another communication going out on Friday, specifically related to how we're going to support faculty through this challenging time that we're facing. A question was asked, why are we opening up campus? And the answer is because we have to. It is what our students are expecting from us. It is certainly what our peers are doing. We're not alone in that. And also, we're doing so with the best advice from our medical community, our healthcare professionals, people like Clay Marsh, who've told us that they believe we can do it, and we can do it while minimizing the spread of the virus. So I want to talk over the next few minutes about some of the things that we're doing from the academics point of view, and I know Rob is going to talk a lot about safety and about testing and those sorts of things. So what I don't cover, I'm sure Rob will, and then Sharon can address the overall planning that we engaged in to get to this point, as well as the communications around this rollout over the next several weeks. So let me begin by reiterating again what the president said, that safety is our number one concern as we return back to campus. So in addition to requiring testing of all of our students and our employees, and Rob will go into detail around that, we're going to be requiring that students and faculty wear masks. And we also, for the faculty, will have these big plastic screens in front of the lecterns if faculty feel like they need to take their mask off when they're teaching. Also, we will have clear masks available if you have students who are hearing impaired and you need a clear mask, you can ask for one of those. We're also, I think, even more, well, not importantly, equally important, of equal importance is we are going to be engaging in social distancing in the classrooms. And we're doing that by reducing density by as close as we can get to 50%. And this is based on the advice and counsel of our public health and our medical experts at WVU, who have interpreted the CDC guidelines, which, by the way, give a great deal of latitude to institutes of higher education in how they interpret those guidelines. But combined with the masks and the reducing of density by 50%, our healthcare professionals believe we can keep people safe in the classrooms. So to reduce density in the classroom, that is requiring us to have classrooms where students can spread out and faculty can spread out. So that means that we have to make decisions about what classrooms we need to preserve for that social distancing. And that means, putting some classes online, having some classes delivered in what's called hybrid flex, or the hybrid model, which is a mix of online and on campus, includes often some live streaming of lectures or taping of lectures. So it's really a combination of those kinds of instruction plus face-to-face. And even then, we're not necessarily going to have enough classrooms. So we're actually looking for alternative spaces, both on campus and off campus. So we're looking at the library, we're looking at the Mountain Lair. We're actually contracting with the Metropolitan Theater for some of the very large lecture classes that are not going to go online. So, you know, we're trying to figure all this out. It's very complex. It's a puzzle. It has many, you know, moving parts, if you will. And so we're really working with the academic units to determine what instruction will be delivered in what format. I know the departments are also working with faculty, but it has to be based on a number of factors, including, you know, the classrooms that are available, the need to provide students with a balanced portfolio of instruction. We can't have all of our students, particularly our sophomores and our freshmen and our sophomores, taking having all their classes online. This is an issue, right? They are concerned about this, very concerned about it. We've gotten a number of questions and complaints from students and parents who think we've already made those decisions. So, you know, it's giving them a balance of the types of instruction, the type of instruction that is required for a particular course. Some translate better to online, some don't, as well as accreditation requirements for the different academic units. We combine all that, right? And then we have to figure out what the schedule looks like. And our goal is to have that schedule out by the end of June. And that's, you know, we hope it's sooner, but that's the latest that we would have that information. Another factor is faculty who have health concerns or who are living with someone who has health concerns, and they feel like they can't teach in the classroom. And so we are actually, we've just rolled out to the academic units our policy for faculty who can request accommodation under the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, because that is, COVID is now, you know, preconditions under COVID is actually covered under ADA. So there's a process. We just rolled it out to the chairs and to the deans and to the associate deans, and we will be rolling it out campus-wide later this week. But the point is that that information's out there, and there is a process. If you are a faculty member and you feel like you have this condition that it really means you shouldn't be in the classroom, you can apply for accommodation. So we have actually done that. You know, the other issue is that we're going to be asking faculty to provide a plan, each faculty member, for how they plan to, or how they would pivot to online should we have to return for any reason to online instruction, as we did in the spring. If there's a spread of the virus, there are interruptions in the semester, everybody's going to have a plan for how they're going to pivot to online instruction, should that be the case, or remote instruction. You know, we are asking a lot of our faculty. And in fact, you know, one of the things, there's a pedagogy subcommittee, and that committee includes representation from Faculty Senate. But you know, there's certain things that are going to have to go into each course. Courses are going to have, for example, a shell and eCampus. Again, this is also that we can flex if we need to move online. That said, you know, we want to support our faculty as much as we can. The Teaching and Learning Commons is continuing to hold trainings. They have a new faculty hybrid flex institute that they will be offering this summer. And in fact, you can get special certification if you go through this process, or you go through the institute and you develop a course and they evaluate the course once you deliver it, which gives you this special certification that you can put on your CV. And if you think that hybrid flex teaching is only for the here and now, I think again, this is going to be a way, I think a very common way that instruction is delivered in the future. Also, we are going to be, this will be in my Friday email as well, we're going to be sending out revised guidelines for annual faculty evaluation that we will be going out, so that faculty who will have to spend more time this summer preparing for this kind of instruction will be rewarded for that, and that they will be able to change their annual assignment to reflect a greater percentage of teaching. And we actually make recommendations to the evaluation committees on how to evaluate a faculty member's overall portfolio during this time frame. You know, we are trying to provide, the best technology in these hybrid flex classrooms. We are investing in technology. We're investing in upgrades to our IT system this summer. I mean, we're doing really what we can to support our faculty, who are going to be teaching again in a different way, in many different ways than they have before. I won't go into great detail. We've rolled out our beginning plan for opening up research, as well as what we expect our travel guidelines will be for the fall. All that has not been entirely worked out, but we're working on that now. And as well as information about our international programs and our international students and graduate students and so forth. So there's a lot more that I could share. Again, there'll be more communication coming from my office this week, but I just wanted to kind of give you a taste of what's to come, and then I'll toss it over to Rob.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Mary Ann? You see me? Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thanks for spending some time with us. I'm going to talk a little bit about testing and facility operations as we move forward in keeping campus safe. And I just want to reiterate a couple of things Gordon and Mary Ann indicated, that as we've worked through the process of how we move forward, we've talked a lot with Dr. Coben, Dr. Marsh, and other folks with expertise in immunology and epidemiologists to try to come through, to work through a set of measures that we think that we can implement this fall to appropriately make us feel safe and get back to campus. There are no perfect set of answers or guidelines. We are learning as we go. But what I can say is that I feel comfortable from a personal standpoint that the measures we're working through and taking as a campus are good, progressive, proactive steps that are balanced in making the fall semester a success. And we're going to continue to learn as we go moving forward. I know there are a lot of questions about how we open the fall from a number of perspectives. And my frame of reference when I started this was working from home. And if we're working from home, how can we come back to work in the midst of a pandemic? And so in teeing up a couple of things I'm going to talk about, I'll just, we went into lockdown from, and everybody working from home because we had no PPE, we had inadequate testing, and we were fearful of our hospitals being overwhelmed. But as President Gee said, that was sort of the hammer, and now we're moving forward consistent with what our health officials have indicated is the dance of learning to deal with a pandemic, which is no fun. I wish we didn't have to live through it. I mean, as someone who's early 40s and an asthmatic with a little bit of high blood pressure with President Gee, I certainly understand that there are folks who are hesitant about the steps we're taking forward. So I just think it's important for you guys to know that we've been thinking a lot about your safety. We've been thinking a lot about our student safety and how we move forward collectively for the best situation possible. So there are a couple of pillars that that are a foundation of what we're going to try to do this fall towards that end. And the first is a really robust testing. Everybody comes back towards the last part of July and August. We're going to provide at no cost to employees and to students a required live virus test, what they call a PCR-based test. It'll be it's a lower nasal swab, interior swab. We will have several sites across our campus that will be available for faculty, staff, and students to go and get their test. We're working with 2 vendors, as well as the hospital and the National Guard, to pull that off. And so by the first day of classes, everybody who has come back to work and student hopefully will have met the requirement that they will have taken a test, and we'll know initially whether someone has signs of the live virus. We know that there'll be a lot of negative tests, and I'll tell you that we've heard on both sides of the spectrum, why are you requiring a test and it's unnecessary? Here's why we think it's necessary. First, I see my video is struggling. I apologize. Give me 5 seconds. Let me move some other place and see if I can get a little bit better. Broadband. Just give me. Is that better?
That's great.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks, Rob.
So we are. So I moved. So we will start this testing in late July of everyone, and our goal through that is to identify anybody who has a positive test, and then we'll go through our normal contact tracing, isolation, and as necessary quarantine for those employees and students who test positive. Not only is it important in identifying those who may be positive as they return to campus, but we also know that there are a lot of our employees in our community who are worried about everybody coming back this August. And so we think it's really critical as an initial step that we test everybody to get a baseline yes or no, or you're positive. And for those who are positive as they return to campus, we prevent them from circulating and causing an outbreak as we move forward. In addition to the initial testing, we will have testing for those who are symptomatic, and we'll work with our hospital system for those tests. And then additionally, Dr. Coben and his team are working on a surveillance program where we hope to be able to test, both for live virus and for the presence of antibodies as the semester goes on. We hope to learn as we go, and the depth and amount of those testings will be dependent on the facts and circumstances as we have them on our campus. So we think that'll give us a really good leg up as we start the semester, and then as on an ongoing basis, it won't be as it was in the spring where you have to wait 14 days after you potentially become symptomatic or in contact with someone, but we do believe we will have readily available broad-based testing for those who become symptomatic. And I'll just remind you, most folks who have been symptomatic, I think the positive rate has been 2 to 3%, depending on the jurisdiction. So in addition to tests, and Mary Ann mentioned this, and I'll just go over a few things quickly, we are going to require everybody to wear a mask while they're on campus or a face covering. So we've already ordered and have a lot of them in.
Everywhere.
Where we can, everybody will have a cloth, rewashable, reusable mask that they can wear while they're on campus. And additionally, we are providing a basic level of hand sanitizer as well as, some wipes for every employee and student as they come back to campus. Masks will be a critical part of what we do. If I've heard anything from Dr. Marsh and Dr. Coben, it's that the masks on campus are going to be critical for how we move forward this fall. I know I've seen several questions about staying 6 feet apart and how can we social distance appropriately while we're on campus. And we've talked a lot about that, and I know Dr. Coben and Dr. Marsh will have more as time goes on. We do think that with the use of masks and the cleaning protocols that we are putting in place, as well as the plexiglass, the reduced density, and other things we're doing this fall, that we will be able to provide that safe campus and give a reasonable opportunity for folks to be at that 6 feet whenever feasible. I know there was a specific question about every other seat in a classroom and whether that was 6 feet apart. And we did talk about that with our health committee. And their indication for us was that if folks are wearing a mask and they are seated and participating in class, that would be sufficient and a safe protocol for us to implement this fall. going forward. Just the final thing before I turn it over to Sharon on the rest of operations. We have acquired more than what we believe are sufficient amounts of hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies, wipes, masks, and other materials that will be distributed throughout campus and present in every building, so that we will be able to clean and have sufficient supplies for everyone from a personal hygiene and from a campus perspective. And we'll roll out those details in the coming weeks. So with that, I will turn it over to, I think I am pivoting to Sharon. Is that right?
You are. Yep. Thank you, Rob. And good afternoon, everyone. As you can hear, there's a lot of information to share. And so as we begin to think about how we want to roll the information out to everyone, we really categorize it into 3 buckets. We're going to talk about campus safety, personal safety, and personal accountability. And so last Wednesday, we had our first major announcement about returning back to campus and what things might look like as we return, followed by a campus conversation or return to campus conversation that was taped and aired then on that Thursday. That same protocol is going to happen and occur every week from now through the end of July. So today, for example, we released information, more information on academic affairs and how academics will work this fall. And on Thursday at 10 o'clock, Marianne and others will lead a campus conversation about academics and answer more questions at an in-depth level. We're going to continue that every Tuesday and Thursday. So we didn't do it Tuesday this week because we have a holiday, but from now on, it'll be every Tuesday and Thursday from next week through the end of July. And we're going to cover a variety of topics. We're going to go into more details about campus safety, the operations that Rob talked about as far as testing, cleaning, what if someone gets sick, all of those things that you have questions about. The details are being finalized and we'll be able to share with you in more detail at those conversations. We're going to talk about student life, about personal safety, employee expectations, and then we'll have a couple sessions toward the end of the summer that's really just how do we prepare for fall. Any of those last minute questions or things we haven't addressed, we'll get back together to do that. So every week there'll be a letter coming from a senior leader that will outline everything, followed by a conversation on Thursday that will allow you to ask questions in real time and allow us to answer. We also have a website that will be updated every week, if not more often, but every Monday or every Tuesday for sure. You should check that after the senior leader letter goes out. That is www.wvu.edu/return-to-campus. And that was in the email that you should have received last Wednesday. So that particular website has all the information you're going to hear from our leaders, as well as Q&A. It will have talking points. It will have the list of all the campus conversations, the topics, as well as the time, and the links. So everything that you need will be at that website. We also have an email account, return-to-campus@mail.wvu.edu. And that's for any question you may have. You can send it to that central account. And I have a team of folks that are working on that if we don't have the answer ready, we find it, and then we'll get back to you directly. And that will also feed into the FAQs that we're developing. So if you have any questions at all after this, you can always send it to that account, and we'll do our best to get it answered as timely as we can. And as I mentioned, we have all kinds of talking points and FAQs and a variety of information that we're sending out to our campus communicators, our campus recruiters, all of our leadership, faculty leadership, et cetera. Everyone will have access to those and can share those as you need to. So from a communication perspective, we're doing everything we can. I am concerned that if we throw everything out there at once, it's too much to take in and there'll be a lot of confusion. So we really have put it into a timeline of what is most important and people are asking about the most, as well as what information we have at this time. Just know that there are still things that we're deciding and trying to determine is the best protocol. And so once those get nailed down, then we can release the information. What I don't want to do is release information based on speculation, what we think we're going to do, because that only adds more confusion out in the marketplace. So we really need to make sure that we have everything buttoned up as much as we can before we start releasing. That will help squelch rumors as well as misinformation being put out there on social media and elsewhere. So with that, Emily, that wraps up the remarks that I have as far as communications, and happy to turn it back to you.
All right, wonderful. So just really quick, just a little bit of housekeeping. all senators have been added as panelists so that we can vote later on. So if you have questions, senators, you should put your questions in the Q&A, or not in the Q&A, sorry, in the chat box. If you're a faculty that's attending and is not a senator, your questions will be posed in the Q&A box. Okay. So with that, I am going to have Nathalie and Dave also join, and Ashley Martucci also join us. So we have been fielding questions over the last week, and some of them have been answered already in the presentations that we've just heard, and some others have not. So Nathalie, I know that you have kind of helped organize all those questions. Do you have any questions that were not answered that you want to pose to any of our presenters?
I do. So there were lots of questions in the chat box, as well as in the questions that were forwarded to us from faculty welfare, and individual questions to both Emily and me, and those were pertaining to masks. So lots of questions about what happens if students don't wear masks. Will there be any penalties? How do we enforce that? It's so many questions. So if you would please kind of address those, I think that would be really helpful.
Who wants to address that?
Me. Let me start.
Why don't you start, and then Rob? Okay.
Rob can respond, and Sharon. So the deal is that faculty, we're working on, there is a committee that's working on all these issues around student conduct. Our policy, our student conduct policy, basically covers this kind of thing. So this is a university policy in which you have to wear masks. Students who are in violation of that policy will be subject to student conduct disciplinary action. This is on the extreme end, right? Like, we're hoping that we can create a culture of shared responsibility. We're going to be communicating about this. All students and faculty will have to fill out an online form, kind of a module, if you will, before they come to campus. It says, these are the conditions which I'm accepting in order to return to campus. And one of those will be wearing masks. So there's that piece of it. But on the sort of the stick side, that's the carrot side. On the stick side, students are subject to student conduct violations. There's a whole process and how we do that through at WVU. A faculty member can ask a student to leave who's not wearing a mask. If the student absolutely refuses to leave, they actually can call campus police. We hope it doesn't get to that level, but you can actually have a student ejected out of class. Faculty are also required to wear masks and are subject to disciplinary action if you don't wear masks. But we feel like between education and the potential for sanctions, that we will be able to control much of that behavior in the classroom and in public spaces on campus. And Rob, do you want to add to that?
Oops.
So I think the only other thing that I'd add to that, Marianne's great summary, is, we're going to try to, we've already been doing it from now on, talk about the importance of masks. I mean, from a communication and personal accountability, responsibility perspective. We know from our surveys that students want to be back. And so one of the things that we're going to implore our students to do is that if we want to be on campus for the rest of the fall and we want to prevent any outbreaks, then we're going to have to make some of these sacrifices for the greater good. And I think that's going to be, as President Gee said, a number of honest conversations about how we all work through this together in an area that's not fun. It won't be fun to wear masks, but if we understand and get our students to understand the importance of it towards the collective goal of being on campus, is another part that we'll add in to the student conduct enforcement mechanisms that we will have.
Yeah, let me just say something else too, that, these are 18, 19-year-olds. They feel vulnerable. The statistics show that they are invulnerable even with the virus. So what we have to do is, and we're starting these conversations with the leadership of our student body, with the leadership of our various organizations. We have to get influencers out there. Peer-to-peer influence is going to be the most important. And obviously, I know that this sounds quirky for me to say, but we have to make wearing a mask cool. You know, we got to figure out ways to have these students feel that this is kind of an opportunity for them to really do something really neat and different, and impose some kind of structure from among their own leadership.
So there's a couple kind of follow-up questions to the masks. One is, will students and faculty, like even if you're outside and you're socially distanced, will people still be required to wear masks if they're, you know, outside buildings, not with inside buildings? And then we also had a couple questions regarding, will all classes need to be wearing masks? I think that Marianne or Provost Reed may have said something about this, about like creative arts classes, performing classes, physical education classes. Again, will they all be wearing masks in those types of settings as well?
Yes. Sorry, I answered.
And then also
the last part of your sentence. Rob, do you want to address the outside parts? They have to wear masks in all their classes, whether they're dancing or you know,
playing instruments and singing.
Dancing or dissecting.
What about playing instruments?
I mean,
we've gotten questions from
on the trombone. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You know, we'll be mapping out these things. We will. We'll have it all laid out. But.
Remember, Emily, when I said that there's still a lot of questions to be answered. This is the ambiguity part of it. You know, for example, a trombone spews things way out there into the hinterland, and so we got to be careful about that. On the other hand, no one can play a trombone with the mask on, so we're just going to have to figure that. But these are what you call the second and third level questions. So we've gone from 10,000 feet to 5,000 feet. Now we're going to 1,000 feet, and that's the reason this conversation is important here, because people who are on the ground are really going to ask those questions that we can get to by this conversation and others.
So one of the other questions was around dining halls and dining experience for students on campus.
Yeah, so as it relates to dining halls and dining on campus, we are working with our provider, Sodexo, on a number of new ways of doing business. So suffice to say, there will not be any select your own food buffets in dining here at the university for the fall. Instead, there'll be a number of other options: takeout, grab and go, and limited seating for all of those dining options. We're working through how we navigate things in the mountain layer and where we have stages for food, and how we work through all of those. So there will be dining and there will be food available in the mountain layer and in all of our halls, but it will be different. I mean, it will be a lot of the same things you see when you go into restaurants now, and when you go to, walk into a restaurant to carry something out now, there'll be similar types of protections that we'll have for all of our dining facilities. I think the one thing we are working through is, instead of 5 or 6 different stations for fast food in the mountain layer, maybe 2 or 3 different selections that we have spread out different places for folks to move through quicker given popularity of certain things. And let me just go back on the mask piece. So, if 2 students are standing 10 feet apart, having a conversation, or 8 feet apart or 6 feet apart in the middle of the Woodburn Circle on a bright sunshiny day, or maybe they're 5 feet 11 inches apart as opposed to 7 feet, are we going to go and have the ability or the resources to tell them to put a mask on? Or do we think that every student will be subject to student conduct, or faculty member or employees? Are we going to be enforcing that? you know, we are going to, for classrooms and inside buildings and hallways where people are close together and there's not the dispersion, we're really going to push hard on requiring masks. We are going to require masks on campus, but just like everything else, we're going to be reasonable as it relates to, you know, every square inch of campus from an outside perspective. There is a degree of reasonableness. We are all, you know, adults. Our students are growing, mature. You know, they're 17, 18 to 22, 23-year-olds, and so what we're going to do is to expect them when they're in close quarters with other folks in those close conversations to have that mask where we'll have some enforcement teeth on it. And so there is some reasonableness to everything that we're doing here.
All right, thank you. And so we had a question about if anybody could give us a report on enrollment for fall. I know we don't have necessarily all the answers, but just an update on enrollment.
Yes,
sure, I
sure.
can do that. Yep, I can handle that. So we're holding steady. We have, you know, at the beginning of the COVID-19 virus, they predicted that enrollment would drop by 20%. We are not seeing that. We are close to our numbers as last year and anticipate that we'll continue to bring students in through August. Typically by the end of June, we have a pretty good idea of our class, but we think that's going to go all the way through early August just because people have financial issues to work through and have other questions, you know, about how campus will look in the fall. So we anticipate seeing those numbers continue to decline, but more slowly than they would typically. MELT has decreased, and if you remember, MELT is decreasing. That's a good thing. That means people are not asking for their deposits back. Our housing deposits are even as last year, which is also a good indicator that the students who have committed to us are sticking. From a new student orientation perspective, we've had over 4,000 students who have already registered and are working their way through an online orientation process. After they do their module, they're meeting with a pre-advising appointment with an orientation leader and having a conversation with the student, and then moving on to their advisor to get their schedules. And so those are all going very well. As well, and we're doing a lot of personal outreach. Dr. Gee has a list for me almost every week of students and parents to call just to reiterate our commitment to them. Our orientation team, as well as our admissions team and visitor centers teams, are creating virtual experiences. So every week there is something new for students and families to come on. We're still hosting parent receptions as we go through orientation. It's just virtually, and the parents are getting into those and enjoying them as well. So, you know, from my perspective, I think we're doing really well, all things considered. I anticipate that we'll end up on a pretty good note. It's just continuing to push efforts forward and not take any breaks. We just need to keep putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak. But all things are looking good for enrollment at this time.
Thank you. So there's a lot of questions in our chat box referring to behaviors of students and faculty and staff off campus. So if we're requiring for people to wear masks and be socially distanced on campus and they leave campus and are not, what are the kind of plans for encouraging people or making sure people are adhering to guidelines while not on campus? I don't know if anybody can answer that, but there's a lot of questions.
So let me, this is Rob Alsop. I think some of it's going to come down to that personal accountability that we've talked about, and personal responsibility of if our students want an on-campus fall, it's something we're going to have to work towards. We know there's going to be students that go to house parties or go to bars, and we're not going to be able to control their every behavior, and we realize that. We are trying to be creative and learn from what other folks are doing, and actually what some business owners have already suggested. And so, as an example, you know, we would love to be able to work with our business owners and work on more outdoor other experiences on High Street that would be more outdoor as opposed to indoor. And so we've been thinking about how we can work with local businesses and community leaders on ways that we can do things that still facilitate some fun, but perhaps not overcrowded bars, you know, downtown on High Street and, you know, at midnight on a Thursday night where there'd be a higher chance of spread. And so we're still working through those, but we are talking regularly with our community partners and trying to think about how we can have some responsible outlets for our students and working with the community for and our employees for how we move forward. So, and I know some of those businesses, for example, on High Street have already been working and thinking about some of that outdoor dining to try to facilitate that. And so those are some of the things that we're working through moving forward. The other thing I will reiterate is there's going to be some of that happens, and there are going to be some positive cases that we're going to have to deal with. I think that's why it's really critical that, as we've talked about, enforcing masks, having really quick the ability to test and then do contact tracing. I know that Dr. Coben indicated there were already 100 people who had taken his course on how to do contact tracing. And so that's going to be a big part of this. And then I guess just the final piece on that, and we can't control all behaviors all the time. The other thing that we can do is for employees and for students is, there's a lot of times if you have a little sniffle or you don't feel real well, you say, oh, I'm okay, I'll go to work. That's not what we want people to do this fall. If you're not feeling well, stay home. If you think you have something and you're, student, then we're going to tell them, work with your faculty member, shoot them an email, have a Zoom comp, do something to where you stay out of the classroom. So I think that's going to be the other aspect of it is from a personal perspective, being accountable and not pushing the envelope for that piece.
All right, thank you. Natalie, do you have any, I know we're trying to kind of like bounce back and forth between questions that have been asked and some of the questions that are being asked in the chat box too. Go ahead.
So we saw a lot of questions about kind of tipping point. So what metrics would be used to decide to cancel in-person classes and move all online? And would those metrics be made public? Would the data be made public? Who would make the decision? Would it be WVU, Mon County Health, the state of West Virginia?
I mean, I guess I'll just start it and say that we don't have a definitive answer on that. We will certainly take our advice from our healthcare professionals. That's who helped guide us and helped us to make our decision in the spring, in conjunction with county health officials and the state. We will watch. And I don't know that we have a definitive number of cases at this point that we're saying that we will close, but if there is a significant rise, we will be responding to that. Rob, do you want to add anything?
So I think that that's one of those things where we don't have the answer yet. I think we're closer to when we went to stay at home than we are to the first day of classes. So we still have some time and we're learning. One of the things that our health experts have indicated to us is that, once we have about 3 or 4 weeks after most states have lifted the stay-at-home orders, we're going to know a lot more. People are socializing, they're circulating, they're acting, with one another. And so one of the things we'll be watching are the test results increasing from a positive perspective? Are the hospitalizations increasing? And so I think this is one area where what the health experts have told us is we need to see a little bit more data to understand how this is moving or what's going on. And I think that's something that we'll have to take into account as we think about what would be the triggers for taking different actions on campus. And so is it an outbreak in a dorm? Is it, several classes? Is it something that just threatens to inundate the entire campus? And I think there's a level of reaction that we could take moving forward to make us safe that we still have to work through.
So there's also been several people that have asked questions about, so we're going to be encouraging faculty, staff, and students to stay home if they don't feel well or, if they have possible symptoms of COVID. And a lot of our faculty are 9-month faculty that don't have sick leave. So can somebody answer kind of what will we do in those cases?
Yeah, we're working through all those details. I mean, in fact, faculty do qualify for our emergency leave policy, even though they don't have leave. Technically, they do. I've talked to legal about that. We're working through some of the details around that, but the reality is we will look faculty who are sick will not be required to be in the classroom.
All right. So we've also had questions about, should we develop a syllabus statement for students to wear masks in class? And I know that that you are working through that as well with Office of Student Conduct, and that would eventually, hopefully, before fall starts, go through Faculty Senate for approval through Faculty Senate. But I don't know if you have any other comments.
Yeah. Well, there's a pedagogy committee that's being led by Evan Witters, but there was also representation from Faculty Senate on that, and they are absolutely developing that statement that would, be included in syllabi addressing that exact thing. I don't know, Evan, are you on the call? Do you want to add anything? I don't know if he has the ability to. I don't know if he has the power to contribute.
I can add some. This is
Nathalie, you're on that committee, right?
Yeah. So we had hoped to bring a draft of a policy statement to Faculty Senate today, but we don't have the actual policy language, the guidance from legal, and so we don't have a draft, but we are working on one.
Yeah, and I might suggest that you might need a meeting in July. I hate to say that, but there's going to be a lot more information coming through. I mean, this is, we're moving a giant institution, and there are a lot of decisions that have to be made and that will impact faculty. So you really might want to think about having a July faculty meeting.
We have been tossing that around as well, and it's probably likely that we will.
Yeah, because we know that
at that point it will be Nathalie and not myself. So
yeah, we'll be rolling out information, and we may need feedback on specific things, and it just seems like it will need that meeting.
So we also have had questions about if a student were to test positive or a faculty were to test positive, who will be given that information, and how will that information be relayed?
I think I have a comment from Jeff Coven. Let me see if he's been able to answer that. We just got those questions today, so let me just see if he answered that. Let me just read you what he said, okay? And it pertains to that and some other things. He said, we are currently mapping out the process and logistics for initial testing. Periodic surveillance testing plans are still in development. We anticipated that all those tested will be able to check their own results with the labs that are performing the tests. Additionally, anyone who tests positive will be notified as soon as the university receives that information from the lab. The local public health authority, i.e. the Mon County Health Department, will determine who else may need to be contacted once they have investigated the case.
Okay. Another question that has been asked is around travel, and I know you said earlier that you're still working on details for kind of like research, research and travel, so for faculty to travel to conferences and stuff. But what do we have any idea of what will happen if, we're going to ask students and faculty and staff, I'm assuming, to limit travel as much as possible, but if a student or faculty or staff does travel outside of Morgantown and return, will they be asked to self-quarantine for a period of time in the fall, or is that too early? Are we too early to answer that question?
I think it's a little early. I mean, we know that travel will be significantly, faculty travel will be, and staff employee travel as a whole is going to be very limited. And that is also a matter of the budget, because it's an area where we can control costs. And we also know that a lot of conferences are canceled, in-person conferences are canceled in the fall. But I would say that, for now, the policy that we have is when you leave the area, am I correct, Rob? It's 5 days that you're supposed to self-quarantine or isolate for 5 days. That will change over time. So we can't give you a definitive answer right now.
We also got questions. We all know that, you know, we're faculty members, but we're also parents and spouses and all sorts of different things. And so, you know, this time has been extremely hard, especially for our colleagues and that have young children who've now become teaching at home and also trying to work full time and all these sorts of things. So we don't know what the public school system is going to be doing at this point, but have we thought about allowing for flexibility for faculty and staff that are also care providers for young children?
I mean, what I'll say, and then anyone else can weigh in, what I will say is, again, you're right. We don't know what will happen. We understand the schools are going to open, but anything could happen, right? Just like anything could happen in terms of a WVU if there's a huge outbreak in the virus. Faculty will have a great deal of flexibility anyway. We are telling faculty and all employees to stay at home if they don't have to be on campus. And for faculty, that means really teaching your classes or being in your research labs for the times that you need to be in there, and then going home and doing your office hours online, you know, having your meetings online. So there'll be a great deal of flexibility anyway built into the schedule. It doesn't really answer the question if, you know, what do you do if you have to continue to teach your own children at home? I mean, it's a tremendous strain, and we understand that. But in terms of flexibility, there'll be a lot built into it because you're not going to be expected to be on campus in the ways that you were in the past.
Natalie, do you have any other questions that we haven't addressed for those that have been sent in? I'm trying to scroll through at the same time you are.
I hit through the main 8 that I submitted earlier.
What did you say, Natalie?
Oh, I just said that I had submitted 8 to them earlier, and they touched on all. They have touched on all 8 at this point.
Okay.
Then there's the other, you know, 30 or 40 that we have to send.
Okay. Yes, so we will be sending additional questions for follow-ups as well, but I do want to give senators that are present today the opportunity to ask additional questions. So if you have additional questions to ask, you'll need to unmute your microphone and ask those of our administration. So I do want to mention that we did get several questions that were not related to COVID-19, that were related to kind of the civil unrest that is happening in our country. There is going to be a campus conversation on Wednesday. Misha Poor with DEI is going to be leading that campus conversation. We are going to send these questions to both the provost and Misha as well. But this conversation today, we didn't want to at all kind of lessen the value of that much needed conversation in addition to what we're talking about with reopening campus. So our plan is for our campus conversation on Wednesday, and anything that's not answered in that campus conversation, then we will continue to seek answers to all the questions that were posed to us. Again, I want to open it up. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask before we move on to our next agenda item?
Well, Emily, if I could just say something, I've really appreciated the fact that you've bundled these questions and the fact that they've come in. I want to emphasize that any questions that you have, and this is to our faculty colleagues, you can submit those questions. You just heard Sharon say that we now have that website, which will immediately get the question to someone, and then we'll get them answered. And by the way, this is the way that we learn what issues that we should be dealing with. You know, there's no collective wisdom here. We're all trying to figure this thing out, and so I think all questions are really really very important, and certainly welcome. I do think in the end, though, the one thing that we have to emphasize for our students, for our staff, for our faculty, is this whole thing is going to depend upon everyone taking direct personal responsibility. And if we can generate that kind of community belief and personal responsibility, we'll have a lot of success. I do believe that. So anyway, I hope everyone knows we appreciate the questions, and this is a lot of hard work, and sometimes they're just not answers, but ambiguity is our friend at the moment.
All right, thank you so much. I guess as I scrolled through some of these questions, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we have a clear answer to, or not clear, but I mean, everything is a little bit ambiguous, as President Key said, but we have been getting a lot of questions around faculty kind of understand that we're all going to kind of need, our workload is going to increase. And we understand that we're not necessarily in the best budget situation that we could possibly be. So as far as compensating or and evaluating faculty, how will that kind of change a little bit in the fall with all these kind of added layers that we're all undertaking?
Yeah, so let me answer that. And I'll be putting this out in writing on Friday, and it will live on our website. But what I want to say is that we're very conscious of the fact that this is, we're asking more of our faculty, and particularly with this pivot to, hybrid teaching online to, in some cases, faculty have larger course loads. They will be our course assignments because of the budget cuts. We totally get that. If we had the resources, we would provide faculty development money this summer, which we don't right now. But our goal around the faculty members' assignment is that there will be, and I'm not going to give it to you all verbally because I've got it written down. I want to make sure I have it right. But the basic premise is that faculty will be allowed to change their assignment to the percentage of their assignment to have a greater percentage in teaching, and then they can go even further than I think it's 10%. We're saying you can increase it. We're also giving guidelines to the departments on what the equivalent is if you're teaching a hybrid flex course, really what that's worth, what it should be worth. It should be worth more than just a single course. And we are giving guidelines into how the portfolio should be evaluated each year. So we're suggesting that if a department has, for example, I'm just giving one example, requires 2 articles, that for this academic year for research, they require 1 article, and that will be taken into consideration when we do the P&T review, or they're during their critical year. And we want to make it so that it's not impossible for faculty. We know this is not, this is a short term, we hope, fix, but we've got to deliver the instruction to the students in a way that is going to engage them and keep them on campus. It is absolutely more important than ever that we retain our students. And so we want to be able to support faculty in doing that. We understand it will be a slightly different assignment for many faculty members, and we want to reward and recognize that in the best ways that we can.
Okay, thank you so much. So we did have a couple follow-up questions in the chat box. So will people be able to? Some people may be taking on a higher teaching load, and others may then have more flexibility or the need to take more time with research. So from what I understand is that faculty are going to be able to work with their chairs to kind of develop that plan, and it will be flexible as far as how you can kind of move things around with that 10%.
That's right. What we are doing is we're issuing guidelines that will help the departments and the faculty member make those decisions. But this is really a provost set of guidelines to ensure that faculty have that opportunity and that option.
And so one other question that was posed too was that there have been students that have returned home, and I think that this may be talking about our international students who may not be able to return to campus, like they may be a week or 2 weeks late to be able to return to campus, and have we thought about what we would do in those cases where students have to be returning to campus late just because of logistics.
Our Office of Global Affairs is working closely with the academic units for, in the case of each of those students, to how to handle that. Some students will get their instruction online. It's going to be a mix of things, but our office is working very closely with the departments in each student's situation.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to say this one more time and then we're going to move on. But if anybody has any additional questions that they would like to ask, please unmute yourself and ask at this time. Oh, okay. I think we're through with the Q&A session, and thank you, Rob and Sharon, for joining us. If you want to stay on, you're more than welcome, but if you don't, you also may excuse yourself at this time as well. Thank you.
Emily, there are a few questions in the Q&A that people haven't had answered. I don't know if you want to address those if you have time, or if you want to address them through email.
I think at this point we will address all further. We've captured everything, correct, Julie? So we can make sure that those questions are answered via email and get them posted to the Return to Campus website. And we will also be sending out our Q&A document from Faculty Senate as well. Unless you see one, Julie, that you think that we need to have answered right now, but I may have missed them.
There was one in particular, one that got some thumbs up that people were interested in.
Okay.
If you'd like me to read that, I can.
That would be wonderful.
It says, faculty across the country are concerned about the effects of caregiving on their productivity as teachers and scholars. Has WVU given any thought regarding responsibilities in the annual evaluation of those of us who are caregivers, either for our children or the elderly beyond the tenure extension?
That'll be included in those guidelines.
Okay,
So
thank you.
the answer is yes.
And yes, and from our Faculty Senate leadership team, we just want to reiterate that if we have missed some of the questions, or you know, we did not get those questions answered for you today, we will make sure that we seek out the answers to all of the questions and get answers back to you in a timely fashion.
Emily, can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah, so I saw, you know, I'm trying not to overreact, but I did see a comment, and the comment was, the decision has been taken, whereas the plan is not fully thought out. And I'm sorry, I have to respond to that because the reality is this has been a massive, massive planning effort to get to this point, and it will continue to get us towards fall. And the reality is, if we waited till we had every single decision or every single aspect of this figured out, then we would be telling our faculty a week before classes that we were going online. And so we know, or we would be going back to campus. So we know we had to make that decision with enough time so that we could put all of these things into place, and also to let our students know what to expect for fall. So, you know, in reality, I don't think it's quite fair to say that. I mean, we cannot possibly have figured out every single aspect of this before making that decision, but we really are putting enormous effort into trying to figure out how to do this, how to do it right, how to protect students and faculty, and how to recognize and reward excellent faculty work.
Yeah, let me just say one other thing. I mean, I'm sorry, we'll have to leave here because I think we do need to get on. But you know, the world is changing. If you had asked me this question, and I think I said you note about this, if you had asked me this question 6 weeks ago, I'd have said, "Hey, listen, we're going to be doing all sorts of draconian things because our financial picture was much different 6 weeks ago than it is right now. We could have been talking about cutting people's salaries dramatically, all sorts of things." And so sometimes you don't want to get the answer to questions at that moment because they may not be in the best interest of what we're trying to do. But we have worked hard. We have improved our financial situations. Sharon and her team have done an incredible job of recruiting and retaining our students. You know, they put me to work. I've called every student body president. I've called every valedictorian in the state. I've done everything that I can, and everyone else needs to be doing that too, because we all have a stake in this. So, so ambiguity is exactly the word we have to deal with, and we'll slowly get the answers. But remember, no one has dealt with this before. I've never dealt with this in 40 years, and I hope that none of you have to deal with it again, but it is what it is. So we're going to move forward as quickly and expeditiously and as thoughtfully as we possibly can. So thank you to everyone. I really appreciate all of you.
Thank you. All right, I'm trying to scroll through questions. Again, if we've missed any, we will get them answered and get back to you as early as possible. We are going to go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is the report from me. I don't have any new information to report today. I think we've had enough information thrown our way to keep our brains busy for a while. But I do want to take a quick moment to thank you all for the opportunity for me to be able to serve this past year as chair of Faculty Senate. It's been a truly great experience for me. But even more importantly, I want to take the time to thank a few very important people that have helped me through this process. And the first is Judy Hamilton. Judy, thank you so much for all the support that you've given me and the ability that you have to never get frustrated, even if I ask you a million questions. The next is Dave Hauser. He was a very tough act to follow. In fact, I didn't even try to really follow his tough act. In fact, I leaned on Dave for advice and guidance many times throughout the year. And I can't thank you enough, Dave, for all that advice and guidance that you gave me over the last year. And then there's Ashley Martucci, who is our chair-elect for next year. In early March, I promised Ashley when she was selected as our Faculty Senate chair-elect that it was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding. And then COVID hit, and poor Ashley didn't know what she signed up for, but she has jumped in and really helped with the Faculty Senate leadership team in the last couple months. So I really appreciate all that you've done, Ashley, as well. And then last but not least is Nathalie, and I'm going to tell you that you guys are going to be in amazing hands with Nathalie next year as your Faculty Senate chair. She is starting in 22 days, and no, I'm not counting down the days, but I'm well aware that I only have 3 more weeks, and she's going to take over in this crazy and unprecedented time. Nathalie's truly one of the most compassionate, diligent, and detail-oriented people that I know, and she's going to move mountain next year with or without COVID in her way. So I owe each of you more money than I have in my bank account, but I'm going to figure out some way to hopefully repay each of you in the future. So I just want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And with that, I'm going to move on to our agenda item number 7. And I think Leslie Cottrell is on the call. So Leslie, could you give us a report from the Committee on Committees?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
All right. So Annex 1 includes the composition of the committees for the 2020-21 academic year. I do want to just slightly revise. The composition doesn't change at all, but I apologize to those who have since been promoted to professor who are listed otherwise. And then there was one that had an inaccurate home or department or unit. So we have made those modifications and they will be on the website accurately, but I just wanted to mention that. Otherwise, I appreciate the Committee on Committees for putting all of this together.
Thank you, Leslie. Are there any questions or points of discussion for Annex 1? All right, so all those in favor, if you can unmute yourself and say aye.
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 It's like the seagulls on, I forget what that movie is, but mine.
Mine.
All those opposed, please say no. Okay, the ayes have it and Annex 1 is approved. So next we are going to have our report from Roy Nutter, who is our representative to state government.
Thank you, Emily. Roy Nutter, Statler College. ACF has been fairly quiet, as you could imagine. The discussions really are all about COVID-19 and how the fall is going to shake out. I'd like to also say that it looks to me like WVU is leading the state in how we're going to operate compared to the other schools. I think they're all looking to us for guidance. It may not be obvious, but they read our plans as well, and I can see them in scheduling and watching some of the other schools. The other couple of things that you might find interesting is we're now seeing some departments eliminated in two-year schools, and if you've been watching the local news, Fairmont looks like it's getting rid of theater and music at Fairmont State. Depending on how their students and finances go at the other state schools, that probably will continue. And the last piece is the state budget. It appears to me that what the governor is saying is it will be fine for next year, that the state budget is not going to be in the hole much, if at all. So I think that is a good thing. Thank you, Emily. That completes my report.
All right, thank you, Roy. So Stan Hellman was not able to join us this afternoon. At least I don't think Stan is on. Stan, are you on? Okay. So I'll give a very brief Board of Governors report. Since March, the Board of Governors has had 2 emergency meetings and 1 official Board of Governors meetings, and all of those meetings were also really consumed with information regarding COVID and the reopening of the university in the fall. And basically, we've heard all the information today that was shared with Board of Governors at those meetings, so I don't think that there's anything additionally to add at this point. Our next item on the agenda is the results of our executive committee election, and that's a for information item. Does anybody have any questions or points of discussion for Annex 2? Okay, hearing none, I will, that annex will be, we don't need to vote on it because it's just a for information, so it will be recorded. And then we are now down to number 11, and I need to pose the question, does anyone have any new business at this time?
Yes. Yes, this is Parviz, and I don't have it. When I was a faculty senate chair in 2007, when I gave the baton to my colleague Steve, then we used to have this large, nice parking permit that we used to hang around and gave to the next faculty senate chair. But we don't have that anymore. But and since we're online and it's so hard, I just want to thank you for your leadership, Emily. I really enjoyed your leadership, especially in this very, difficult time. So I would ask all of my faculty senate colleagues to give a hand for Emily. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Okay, and I think Lori Andrus, I think you also have new business.
Yes, thank you very much, Emily. Greetings, colleagues. Before I begin, I want to recognize the leadership for a valiant and courageous effort to address the unknowns and the known unknowns during this time. I have been in awe of these efforts and look forward to how they unfold over the next few weeks. Next, to my colleagues, I want to say thank you for carving out time to consider this issue of social justice and the murder of George Floyd by police officers in Minneapolis, which by some strange stroke of fate has thrust itself forward as an inescapable and international issue, much like the pandemic. The Senate Faculty Committee on Inclusion and Diversity has endorsed the letter you received today and would like to make a motion that the full Senate offer support to the Morgantown-Kingwood NAACP by endorsing the letter and recommend to the NAACP the inclusion of WVU scholars that study policing, social justice, racism, and public policy to be a part of these important conversations that the letter seeks to initiate.
Okay, so Lori, did you made, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, but you made a motion that the faculty Senate endorsed the letter from the Morgantown-Kingwood chapter of NAACP, and I will need a second for that motion.
Hi, I'm Carrie Valentine. I second that motion.
Okay, so it's a little weird with not having Judy sitting right next to me, so I'm hoping I'm doing this correctly, but are there any questions or points of discussion related to that motion?
Emily, this is Milena. Could I say something for a moment?
Sure.
I invited Jim Nolan, who's an expert in community policing, hate crimes, and bias, to take a look at the letter. And you'll note in Lori's suggestion that she includes this, she's amended the approval of the letter to also suggest that we include the expertise of WVU faculty who do scholarship and empirical work on policing. And I've invited Jim to join the meeting for a moment to say words about the letter, and he's here. Jim, do you want to share your thoughts, or do we have time for Jim to share his thoughts?
So Milena, can you just, I mean, in a normal meeting, we would just if you would just recognize Jim, and then he can go, like he can speak.
By saying, I recognize Dr. James Nolan, Chair of Sociology, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So Jim, please. Are you on, Jim?
I believe he's an attendee. I'm not sure he's a panelist.
Yeah, Julie's able to.
I actually have allowed him to speak.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Julie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I was particularly happy when I saw the letter from the NAACP that they're willing to reach out to the Morgantown Police Department. And there's a list of very specific concrete items. I was also thrilled that Laurie Andrus is involved, because I know that she has, she sees things the right way from my perspective. And she understands the deeply rooted racist problem in policing. But I added to Milena a factor that I think is less obvious in some of the dialogue about policing. And one is the problem that we somewhat take for granted, that the police are doing the right thing. And I know that there's some motions on the floor in Minneapolis and around the country to defund the police. And it's related to the idea that they don't think the police are effective. My work is in police reform, and I generally frame the issue this way. I generally think about the police as the behavior of the police is like the behavior of players in a game like American football. Now, if you want to understand why there's so many injuries in football, you have to look at the game itself, and you see that these are hard-hitting people, and the game is a hard-hitting event. So in the game of football, in recent years, they've been videotaping, and they've added penalties, and they've zero tolerance in hitting in a particular way. And all of these things have had little impact on the actual injuries in football. And so my take in policing is the same way. There's this game called law enforcement. And this has emerged since the last time civil rights riots were happening in the streets. The Nixon administration passed the war on drugs and set the police departments in motion, making arrests, and it's become a way of being a police officer. Just, if you listen, and when people talk about policing, sometimes they talk about police or law enforcement as if it's the same thing. And so this game of law enforcement, I score points by arresting people. I'm a warrior. I get status in the profession by making arrests. It doesn't matter necessarily whether or not communities are even safer. And the research that supports, research has been passed that supports the notion that there isn't bias in policing. And that's generally because many of the problems in policing are also committed by African-American officers. If you look at celebrated cases, Freddie Gray, 3 of the 6 officers were African-American. And the group in Minneapolis was a multiracial group. So so although race is deeply embedded, racism is deeply embedded in the profession, the initial police departments in the slave patrols. And so, but it's really in recent years, this focus on war on drugs, broken windows, fixing broken windows, stop and frisk, zero tolerance. All of these things have developed a disposition in officers and a worldview that sends them out into communities looking for people to lock up. And this is really what's wrong in policing. And I think that working with the NAACP and presenting these sorts of ideas, and along with the controls like citizen overview and body cameras and those types of things are all extremely useful. But they alone are probably not going to fix the problems in policing. It's a much broader issue than that. Any questions?
Thank you, James. Does anybody have any questions for James, or any other questions or points of discussion for the motion on the floor at this point? Okay. So Julie and I asked Julie to set up a poll for us so that we can actually take a vote at the time on whether or not the Faculty Senate endorses the letter from the NAACP, Morgantown, Kingwood branch of the NAACP to our police chief in Morgantown. And so if you, everybody should be able to see a poll that has been on your, yep, you got it. Everybody's voting.
Emily, this is Lori. I'm clicking on the poll and nothing is happening.
Yeah,
same for me. I'm getting a message that host and panelists cannot vote.
Yeah.
Okay, Julie, can we change people from panelists to attendees so they can vote?
I can do that. Are you done with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
There's a lot of them.
Okay.
Hi, Emily, can I ask you a question real quick? This is Andrew Nix. So
can we show by raise of hands to have?
Yes, we can if we can count them.
Yeah. Has this letter been sent to UPD already? Like, are they well aware of the existence of it and that whether they agree? And because it's not just Morgantown Police Department, correct?
So I talked with Dr. Jerry Clark, who is president of the local chapter of our NAACP, and he is currently trying. So what he would like to do is to work with our student group on campus, the NAACP student group. Unfortunately, because of COVID and our students aren't here right now, he really wants that to be coming from our students to work with our campus police. But because of COVID right now, he's in the process, but they're seeking to get the same kind of letter to our university police coming from the student organization. But just because students aren't on campus right now, that's been stalled a little bit. But the plan is to also have a similar letter to our campus police as
Okay,
well.
I just wonder about
This
us
is
as
Lori.
faculty senators and university reps voting on this without UPD knowing about it. That, I guess that's my main concern.
So this is Lori. I have something to add to Emily's statement. The NAACP has been working with the city of Morgantown and the interim mayor, and also reached out to the interim police chief. And so they are aware that the letter is coming.
But he's talking about our university police, Lori. Like WVU's police department is what Drew was talking about, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, UPD, yeah.
Emily, Roy Nutter, and I had a similar question along Mon Sheriff. You know, the PDs in Morgantown include the sheriff and state police. And I just wondered if we were doing the same thing with them.
So again, I talked with Jerry this morning a little bit, but he had said that the Morgantown Police Department is the largest kind of police enforcing entity within Morgantown or Kingwood area, and so they were starting with them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't seek out kind of the same kind of collaboration with other entities as well.
My thinking was going along the line, I'm not sure how many of our students and, in fact, our faculty actually live in Morgantown.
Well, but if they're in Morgantown, they would be policed by Morgantown Police Department if they're here on campus or in the Morgantown area. So
they can live like across from the stadium and they're not in the city of Morgantown.
Can I just say something? This is Carrie Valentine. This is really just to ask if we are, as a faculty senate, signing on to a letter that would reach out to these various departments, right? To talk about organizing and implementing agenda aimed at policy or policing practices. And so the question about does the UPD know, what we're trying to do is you know, approve a letter that would go out to them, not to like make any decisions about their policing. I just want to clarify that.
yeah, it's real. I mean, my conversation with Jerry, it's really to like kind of extend the olive branch to start having conversations with our police department regarding those 10 items on the letter that you received.
Yeah, I guess the solution here to everything, what Roy's saying, what I'm saying, what other people are saying is, if we endorse this, we endorse this letter and, you know, and also endorse reaching out to all other law enforcement entities within the area, including UPD. It's that simple, right? I don't think any of us is against what's in the letter, but just making sure that we have a concern that all policing entities, including our university police department, are included in future communications, something along those lines. I think that would be great.
Yeah, this is Lori. We can assure you that Dr. Carr and the NAACP and our subcommittee are looking at all of the other policing entities within the region. And so by endorsing this letter, we are not closing off the opportunity to draw them into a conversation. And in fact, NAACP is currently looking into that as we speak almost.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I just want to appreciate, we do appreciate that, Drew, though, that we need to go beyond the Morgantown Police and all the entities that in our area that are you know, similar as well. And again, like when I talked to Jerry this morning, they're starting with the Morgantown Police because it's the largest, but they do not, like Lori said, they're not planning to stop with just the Morgantown Police Department. So are there any other?
We're almost done moving folks over to the attendee panel so they can actually use the poll.
Okay, wonderful. So Molly and Donna, you have your hands raised. Do you have a question, or is that you voting? So if you can please vote using the poll, that would be wonderful, because then we have an actual breakdown.
Emily, do we use the poll or do we raise our hand over here?
If you could, so Julie's moving everybody over to attendees, and as soon as you're moved over to an attendee, you're going to actually use the poll to vote.
Okay.
You're one of the last that's getting moved over, Lori.
Yeah.
And Julie, if you just, can you move Nathalie or keep Nathalie over as a panelist? Can you move her back? I'm sorry, I should have told you that.
Yes, that's fine. Would you like me to move President Gee over there as well?
You can keep President Gee as a panelist. I just need
All
Nathalie
right.
back as a panelist.
I'll bring her back over.
Okay. All right. I think everybody has had a chance to vote, and if you can look on the results, 92% of senators have voted to endorse the letter from the local chapter of our NAACP. So the motion has carried, and we will let Dr. Carr, Lori and I will let Dr. Carr know that Faculty Senate endorses the letter from the NAACP to our Morgantown Police Department. And with that, does anyone else, well, everybody has now been moved over. So if you have any other new business at this point, if you can put it in the chat box. I'll give you a minute or two to put any other new business in the chat box. We did have a question that asked if we will get a link for this recording, and we have been recording today's session, and we will put up a link on our Faculty Senate website with the notes from the meeting as well. So that will happen. And with that, we are to our final agenda item, which is adjournment. And I don't have the big parking pass to hand over to Nathalie, but I do have, I am going to turn over the meeting to Nathalie to adjourn. This will be my last meeting, and if we do have a July meeting, Nathalie will be our new Faculty Senate chair. So Nathalie, with no further ado, do you want to adjourn our meeting?
Yes, I move to adjourn the meeting.
And I will second that because there's nobody else that can speak. So Nathalie, you have to unmute yourself, I think, and adjourn the meeting.
Oh, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. And we got done 10 minutes earlier than I thought we would. So I appreciate everybody's time this afternoon, and thank you again.